Hey guys, Positive here, and today I'm going to be starting a new video series. It's going to be focused primarily on teaching players on how to really elevate their game to the next level. And so today we're going to be talking about how to hull down properly. So most of you are probably familiar with how basic hull down. So like using your gun depression, peeking your tank up over a ridge, and taking a shot. However, this isn't really universally applicable. So if you have tanks with bad gun depression, like these Soviet heavies or even like the new Chinese 113, you're really going to be struggling with doing so. So I'm going to be showing you really all the ways that you can abuse folds in terrain to hide your hull and deal damage without really having to expose your hull. So today we're going to be talking about all the different methods on how to hide your hull and deal damage without really taking too much fire in return. So the first method is the most basic. So I'm sure you've all seen this kind of graphic before. So basically you roll up over a ridge, and then you should be able to have shots with only your turret exposed like this. And if they try to fire back at you, it's going to be a very difficult shot to hit the turret. So this is pretty standard. So let me just show you how this works in a training room. So a good map to show you how this works, guys, here on mines. So this is a pretty common scenario where you're fighting for the hill. If you want to be able to take shots at the enemy vehicles on the other side of mines, in this position, I'm actually completely hull down. All he sees is my turret. He's not actually going to be able to pen me in this position. However, as you can see, I've got pretty easy shots into his hull like so. Now, the way that you know that you're completely hull down and you're not exposing your hull is if you're trying to take a shot at the enemy vehicle and your reticle is only barely above your cover. So as you can see, the distance between his gun and my cover is actually quite small. So I can actually take shots at him, and I can even go for his turret. And in this case, I'm still very hull down. All he'll really be able to see is just a little more of my turret. But the safest way is to just expose as little as possible, and he still won't be able to pen me, even if I am exposing a little more. Just make sure that you're not going all the way up over the ridge like so. Otherwise, they will be able to have a good chance to pen you. So once he reloads, I'll show you what happens if you overexpose. So if you overexpose in this position, they can pen you in the hull just like that. So you have to be careful of that. Now the thing about this tactic is it's not exactly universal. So I'm using a T-32 in this example, and this has 10 degrees of gun depression, which is actually quite good. However, in most vehicles like this IS-6, you'll find that it's actually quite difficult to do this. You'll find your gun sticking up in the sky, and you won't be able to get your gun down on the enemies. So that's the real limitation of trying to go up over a ridge like this. So we're going to move on to our next tactic now. So now we're going to move on to what is, in my opinion, the most universal and most effective way to hull down. So this method requires no gun depression, which makes it perfect for things like Soviet or German vehicles, which don't have the gun depression to do that normal kind of hill-based hull down. So what you do here is you find the edge of a ridge as just like this, and then you just peek out the corner. So yes, our hull is exposed a little bit here, as you can see, but this front hull, this is really well angled, and it's also quite thick. So especially in vehicles like a T-54, the E-50, or even like the T-32 in this case, if you have a sloped front and a front-mounted turret, this is going to be the most effective way to hull down for you. The enemy is just not going to pen this. That's just not going to happen. And then the only other thing exposed is our turret. So if you try to shoot the turret, it's also going to be a difficult shot, clearly, because this is a T-32 using my little graphic. But also, even if you have no turret armor, what this allows you to do is you can rock back and forth. So you can shift your tank back and forth in and out of cover, which makes it very difficult for the enemy to hit you. So why don't we just show you what that looks like in a training room. So here we've got a little scenario here on desert sand. So our enemy is directly in front of us, but we don't really want to take too much damage in order to be able to fight him. So if you try the first method of hull down that you most commonly see talked about in guides and stuff, you won't actually have the gun depression to do so, and he'll just pen you in the lower plate if you try. So this is why I have issues with guides only showing kind of that first method of hull down. It's not particularly effective in Blitz because of the extreme hills. And also, if you don't have gun depression, even if you have lots of gun depression like we do in the T-32, it won't be particularly effective. So this brings us to our second method, which is if you want to be able to pull up parallel to the ridge, as you can see here. Now this is very important because what this allows you to do is you can sneak up out of cover and go back into it almost immediately. This will make it very difficult to hit you, especially if you wiggle back and forth like this. When you hear people talking about wiggling, they don't mean like this. What they really mean is being able to move back and forth on a ridge line. So this way, it's actually extremely difficult for him to hit us. And even if he does, he only sees our turret, whereas we can shoot him perfectly easily. And I think this is probably the best method, especially for blitz, because cover like this is everywhere. If you Once you start looking for it, you'll be able to find like these ridge corners pretty much everywhere you look because of blitz's map design. So even here, you can find spots pretty much on every map. You'll be able to find spots like this, and really, this is what makes this method of hull down so great. Is once you really master it, it's like you have cover pretty much no matter where you go, except for towns, which is why Unicoms hate towns, because you can't, there are no ridges to try and hide behind. So that's really it for this second method. And so now we'll move on to our next. So our next method is something of a variation of the first, but it involves actually holding the high ground instead of your opponent. And this method really shows why holding the high ground is important. And what you want to do is, if you have the high ground on your opponent, you want to roll back from the edge of the ridge until you only have your turret exposed. And then you should be able to take shots on enemies that are below you, and they won't actually be able to return fire. If this Type 59 tries to return fire on towards our Type 59, you can only see the turret. This is not an easy shot to hit. However, from our position, we can see pretty much the entirety of his tank, and we're also shooting down on him, which negates the sloping. And since pretty much every tank ever has the armor sloping upwards, this actually reduces the effective armor, making it an even easier shot for us to hit. And however, it is important to remember that you do have to roll back from the ridge line, because if you position your tank, say here, then this tank will be able to shoot up into your lower plate, and that's pretty disastrous. Make sure that you don't ever do that. So let me just show you how this works in a training room. So what we've got here is we're in a situation where we're on the high ground up here on Middleburg, and we're trying to shoot down on tanks inside the town. So here we've got an IS-6, and as you can see, when you can shoot down on tanks, you do negate that frontal armor. So we can pen him pretty easily because we're shooting down on him, even without gold rounds. And then what I did mention earlier is you do want to roll back from the edge of the ridge. So you know that you're kind of hull down again, because you can look at the enemy gun and then look at the position, like how high it is above the ridge line. In this case, we know that we're pretty safe, and he won't really be able to pen us. Well, he actually needs to hit us, but while he reloads, let me show you what happens if you're actually not hull down. So if you're at the edge of the ridge line, what that does is that does give the enemy the ability to shoot up into your lower plate. You cannot let this happen. So make sure that you roll back from the edge of a ridge line whenever you try to do this, or it's going to hurt and you're not going to be happy. And that's pretty much it for this. It's pretty simple. It's also why Unicoms prefer to take the high ground, because this is easy. This is like shooting fish in a barrel. And for the enemy, there's nothing they can do. They have to just charge uphill constantly against hull down tanks. That's not going to work out. So that's about it. Moving on. Now we're going to be talking about scenarios where you have some sort of cover in front of your tank that you're not actually like climbing on top of. So in the other scenarios, you're kind of going hull down just in front of the ridge that you're going to be using for cover, as in all of these examples. You're just using the ridge in front of you, but you're not really using anything else. And what makes this example different is you kind of have to use the rest of the terrain to your advantage. So in this case, like what we see this Type 59 here doing, is this Type 59, it's using this little depression area to angle itself over this hill, so it only exposed the turret from this line of sight. However, it doesn't have to use any of its gun depression, because like if you're trying to depend on your Type 59 to use the gun depression, it might look like this, and that's what we want to avoid. And this method of hull down really looks like all sorts of things. It depends on the scenario. So let me show you guys in training rooms what I mean. So I think this spot on Castilla is a very good way to demonstrate kind of what makes the difference between good hull down and bad hull down. So like what some players might try to do from up here is like they might try and peek on enemies down below like this. However, in this scenario, it's a pretty easy shot into the lower plate. He didn't pen, but it's T44. And he actually does have a shot into our lower plate, which is what makes this problematic. So what you can do is you can use this little spot here to hull down. In this case, only our turret and a little bit of our hull is exposed. However, the part of our hull that is exposed is actually super well angled and quite difficult to pen. He's firing gold at us, so that kind of shows how strong this is. And you can take a shot and roll back down behind cover. Now, now the important part here is if you try to do it like too close, you won't have the gun depression, and B, he'll be able to shoot you straight in the hull, like just like that. So you need to be careful. What I'm doing is I'm using kind of like this slope here, so I can angle my tank downwards. A, this gives me the gun depression I need to be able to shoot him, and B, this lets me use more of the ridge in order to hide my tank and be able to fire back at him. Now, like there are other spots where you can kind of use this trick as well. So another common one is going to be on Rockfield. So let me show you that. So here we've got a scenario where the enemy is sitting in the B cap on Rockfield in Supremacy. Now, what I see a lot of players doing to try and reset B from C is they'll try and drive up like this. And this is going to get you killed because now you're exposing pretty much the entirety of your tank. They can shoot you in the lower plate, and you can't even get the reset until you drive like this. Not only are you exposed from B, but everyone along this A cap area is going to be able to shoot you. And this is really a major blunder that you should avoid. It's why you can't always depend on those methods that depend on using gun depression. So what you should do is you should use this little ridge, this hill on the side. What this does is it angles your tank downward, and this gives you the gun depression you need to hit them from over the ridge. I'm actually not sure how I missed that shot. But also what this does is it makes you extremely difficult to pen because now all they see is your turret. They no longer see your lower plate, and you can pretty much just reset all day from here. And there's really not a whole lot they can do about it. Also, you're more or less covered from pretty much half the map now, because if they're on this side, they're also only going to see your turret. So this is a much safer, much easier way to reset the cap. And just like on Castilla, what we're doing is we're driving one set of tracks up onto a ledge to angle our tank downwards so that we can shoot over this little ledge.